Why is working together for patients important for doctors?
Okay, so I think teamwork is a really important skill to have as a doctor, and I think having good teamwork means we can have optimum patient care, we can ensure that there are no mistakes made, and that we can really maximise the resources around us, whether that's when doctors collaborate interdisciplinary or intradisciplinary within a multidisciplinary team. I think there's a really good example that I saw of that when I was volunteering. Just before a patient was about to be discharged, there was a multidisciplinary team meeting which integrated physiotherapists to make sure that they were able to regain their strength when they're going back out into their home, a nutritionist because they needed to alter their diet as a result of their procedure, the surgeons that were there to make sure that all of the wounds were ready to be going, as well as all of the other different nurses that ensured medications and the pharmacists as well. I think it was a really good example of to really make sure that this patient was the safest and most prepared to go back out into the home, to make sure that they have no other further healthcare difficulties, that working together and optimizing it as a team is really good.
Tell me about a time when you confronted a peer or supervisor because you knew they were making a mistake.
Okay, so I used to work at a local village food shop, and I think one of the times that I was helping a peer, I noticed over a couple of shifts that they hadn't been taking the remaining stock and they'd been reordering more stock, and that was increasing the costs for the store and not optimizing everything that we had. And so I thought nobody else had really picked that up yet, and I therefore decided to just pull them to the side in private and to just help them chat through it. I started off by saying like, oh, how's it going? Do you have any problems with the stock that I could help you with? Are you having any issues, to see if they had noticed if they were having any issues? And from that they said no. So I just gave a little clarification and said, just remember when we're putting out the stock, just make sure that we're checking all of the top shelves, that we're getting as much of the stock out as we can. Asked them if they had any questions and if there was anything else that they needed, because I knew they were fairly new to the shop and they didn't have as much experience. And I think noticing these little mistakes and supporting our peers is really important in a healthcare setting. You know, we all work together as a team. We want to make sure that all of patients' health is as best as we can make it. I think offering support to these people and acknowledge mistakes but not criticize them for that, offer them support, is really important.
What is compassion and why is it important for medical practice?
Okay, so compassion to me is having empathy for people that need it the most and at times when they're in need. And I think that is kind of what all healthcare people should display, compassion towards their patients. I think it's really important for understanding patients' needs to see how that they can help them the most and being proactive about it. It's not just about doing the procedure or just about making sure that you have all of your medical duties done. It's about ensuring that that patient has the best whole experience, whether that is helping them with their concerns, if they have a specific concern, maybe about when they're transitioning back to home life, if they've been in hospital for a period of time. And I think by showing this compassion and showing that you really care for that patient, it also makes the doctor-patient relationship a lot better, and I think it means it's a lot more effective, and they're probably more likely to voice their concerns, and you've therefore gone above and beyond to help them. So I think by displaying compassion to patient, it's just getting the best patient care that possibly could happen.
Tell me about a time in which you demonstrated compassion despite being in a stressful situation.
Okay, so I think one of the key moments that stands out to me when I was quite proud of how I showed compassion despite being very stressed myself was when I was working in my local food shop, and unfortunately we were threatened and robbed for co-workers. And obviously that is an incredibly stressful time. You start panicking, wondering whether it's going to happen again. But I noticed over the course of the next couple of weeks after the incident had happened that a couple of my peers were struggling quite significantly, you know, kind of not wanting to be at the front of the shop and really being quite reserved and not as, say, chatty and not as confident as normal. And I really wanted to reach out to them and to offer them support. I waited until they were on one of their breaks, and I kind of just sat down with them and I made them a cup of tea and just wanted to, talk through what had happened and ask them how they were feeling and if there was anything I could do to help them. And at that time for me, I was still quite panicked and quite hyper aware of everything in the shop, but I really noticed that my peer was struggling a lot more and wanted to know that they could ask me for support, they could ask me for help if I needed to help them, maybe with one of their specific jobs in the shop that they were most nervous about, and really just talking it through, making sure they know that they are not the only person in this situation, and showed them, different people that we can talk to, if we want to progress this to a manager and things like that, to really discuss what we can put in place to make them feel safer.
Why do you think respect and dignity is important for an NHS doctor?
Okay, so I think respect and dignity is one of the core NHS values. I think it's really important that we show respect and dignity to all patients and all people that interact with the healthcare system, no matter who they are or where they come from. We as healthcare people should offer that respect and dignity. I think one of the examples of respect is always respecting patient autonomy. A patient always has, at the end of the day, the end decision into their treatment plan, and it's about respecting those decisions. And as long as they are educated and they have informed consent and you've offered as much information as you can to them, I think it's really about respecting individual patients' choices. I also think dignity is something that happens and should be given to all patients on a day-to-day basis in the NHS. Whether that be, say, in an examination, making sure that everything is private and that all of the consent is given and that the patient feel as comfortable as they can do, or whether that also be kind of respecting their confidentiality. I think dignity and confidentiality are tied together very well, and all patients should deserve confidentiality. I also think as well, dignity for one is giving the time and the space and the kind of private aspect that should be given in healthcare settings, particularly when there is maybe a difficult diagnosis that has just been relayed, or if someone is going through a particularly difficult time, that giving them that dignity to grieve in private and to have the facilities and everything to do that, I think is really important. So both respect and dignity, I think they're tied very well together, but should be offered to all.
Tell me about a time in which you disagreed with a friend or colleague who did not share your values, beliefs, or ideas.
I think the best example I have of this is probably when I was playing a netball match, and I noticed just coming up to half time that one of the people on my team was being quite aggressive and displaying quite dirty tactics in terms of like the physicality and things that are outside of the rules. And I could see that the other player on the other team was getting quite emotionally distressed. I personally didn't agree with that. I don't think that you should resort to physicality or not respecting the rules of a netball game just in order to gain your own advantage. So I didn't really feel comfortable watching that. So at half time, when we all went into our respective team huddles and groups, I just thought I would walk over to the defender and just pull them aside, just quietly. Just to say hey, I noticed that the player that you're playing against is, she seems to be getting quite upset and seems to be taking quite a battering, and just kind of taking the balance of knowing she's on my team and I want to have the best performance out of her and I respect her as my friend, but also knowing that I didn't feel comfortable watching that player be caused harm. I really encouraged her, you're really fast, you're really fit when it comes to running. You don't need to resort to the physical tactics. I believe in you so much, and I think you can win the ball in a completely other way. And that, I think, is the best way to go about it. And I think it was quite a difficult situation because it was a very tight match that we needed to win. And obviously the tactics might have been slightly working, but I still think that it was not respectful and that we still could have won in other ways. So I think that was a good tactic, and she ended up stopping and we went on to win the game. So I think a win all round.
What is the importance of commitment to quality of care for doctors?
Commitment of quality to care is also one of the NHS core values. I think it's really important to make sure that we have optimum patient care. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that this occurs all across the healthcare systems, whether that's in the lab, whether that's as doctors individually, or whether that's as the complete, healthcare system with nurses and receptionists. But I think doctors specifically play a really important role in this. I think on an individual basis, as a doctor, for your commitment to quality of care, it's really important that you are keeping up to date with guidelines, that you're making sure that you're up to date with the current research to make sure you're giving the best standard of care that is known to be out there. I think it's all about, the personal journey of making sure that, you graduate from medical school when you're, say, 24, 25, and medicine is such a constantly growing scientific community, and across the years and years of your life, you're really going to have to keep this up. And so it's important to be really passionate about that and to see how it can reflect on patient care. I also think on kind of a more bigger scale, in terms of commitment to care, things such as making sure that the hospital protocols and guidelines and seeing if there are any updates and if there are any improvements or innovations that could be done there to improve commitment. And also I think as well, maybe the aspect of making sure that the whole team together is committed and everyone is on the same page, and whether that's, educating others and making sure that everyone is aware of the new guidelines that just been in place, so that everyone together as a team can up-level their standard of care. So I think across the board, it's really important that commitment to quality of care is maintained.
As a doctor, what steps would you take in your work to ensure the quality of care is continually improving?
Okay, so I think it's really important that doctors show the commitment to quality of care. And I think a good example of this is learning from your mistakes. So for example, say if a doctor makes a mistake when prescribing a medication that they then find out, ensuring that they are committed to the research to understand where they went wrong and why they went wrong, and then also having a plan of action to then make sure that these mistakes don't happen again. We can acknowledge doctors aren't perfect, mistakes are going to happen, but it's about having the enthusiasm and the commitment to patient quality of care that we recognise and we learn from those mistakes. I think kind of as a general hospital and a functional team, maybe, kind of the clinical audits that happen, recognising if there are policies and protocols that are being introduced in other hospitals that have been seen to be really working well, to doing the research on that, to contacting the relevant people to see what can be done to integrate that into your current hospital and setting, and then making sure that that gets followed up and that everyone and all the relevant people are educated on this. I think that's really important. So yeah, I think altogether there's lots of different ways, but I think it's all about the enthusiasm and the commitment to the innovation and to constantly be progressing. Like I said before, medicine is a lifelong commitment and it's a continually progressing scientific field, and it's just about trying your utmost best to really put in place those actions.
What does improving lives mean to you?
Okay, so as a doctor, I think improving lives is not only increasing lifespan, but increasing health span so that people are living to the best quality of life that they can for as long as they can. And I think as a doctor, that covers so many different aspects, whether that's physical health, whether that's mental health. There's so many different areas that they can cover. So for me, it's not only about treating patients when they are ill. It's about ensuring that they have complete total health, starting from things such as preventative medicine. Doctors are really important in things like the Stop Smoking campaign and the encouraging exercise, whether that's increasing screening rates and making sure everyone's educated on key signs, to then for them to get diagnosed and treated in the normal hospital setting. But it's also then as well about making sure that they are comfortable when patients, say, who have been in hospital for a long time, need that extra support when going back into homes or going back into the community, by making sure that it's a whole healthcare system rather than just treating people when they are ill. And I think in that way it's increasing, the whole country's health, like we say, our health span. If we have so many different measures at which we can kind of action, it's going to increase our health span massively.
Give me an example where you've affected another one's life in a positive way, either through action or education.
I think one of the experiences that I've had that I've been most grateful and have really enjoyed having an impact on another person's life is when I was volunteering for a charity called Friends for Leisure. And kind of the aim of the charity is to help those young children who have disabilities to really help form friendships and to improve their communication skills. So I was paired one-on-one with a non-verbal young girl who hadn't been able to be integrated into school life, and I really helped her with her communication skills, whether that's through, kind of toys or through kind of visual ways, was what I learned was the best way to help her communicate. And watching her progress from where we started, when obviously, first time interacting, I felt, like I was rubbish. I couldn't help her with anything, and it was going to be really difficult to form that relationship and friendship that she really deserved. But over the 2 years that I spent with her, it was so lovely to see the just progression and improvement that they had. So where we had a real genuine bond and friendship at the end, where I felt, she felt completely relaxed with me, and I was there to help support her through her school work if she needed, or through making relationships with other people. So I think for me, that's probably one of my proudest moments in trying to help another person.
What is the importance of communication in healthcare?
Okay, so I think communication is really important, and there are two main forms that I think are used within healthcare: written and verbal communication. So I think starting with written, for example, with things such as when we are referring patients on or transferring patient notes, that ensuring that they are in the best detail so that when passed on to another doctor, that the patient can then receive the most optimum care and the most efficient care, rather than having to backtrack and trying to work out what medications are needed. And I think verbal is probably the most important one. Communication, not only within the multidisciplinary team to make sure that everyone is on the same page and that everyone is available to give the best advice for the patient, but also most importantly, the one-to-one relationship between the doctor and the patient. Communication needs to be really key, whether that's making sure that they have informed consent, so they know exactly about any procedures or examinations or medications, the risks and the benefits and why it's important. And also I think by building this communication relationship and making sure that the patient as well wants to communicate with you and tells them what they need, I think it can really have the most optimum care. I think communication as well is really important. You deal with such a variety of different people as a doctor, and it's about adapting your communication skills to the individual. That's really important. I think, whether that's from a child, maybe integrating kind of stories or replicating it with characters to try and help them understand as much as they can, because obviously medical jargon isn't going to be able to be understood by children, or whether that's from people who are suffering with dementia that might need it in a slower form, a more condensed form, or away from, where there's lots of external noises and environments that could make the information not be given to them as clearly as possible. Or again, kind of an example of if there are language barriers, that ensuring if there's an interpreter or if there's translators that are needed, Or again, people who are hard of hearing or have lost their sight. Again, making sure that we are adaptable in our communication, because communication is the most important thing, I think I would say, within a healthcare setting, making sure that patient is comfortable and that they consent and that they are aware of what is going on. So it's really important that we can have such a wide variety of communication for optimum patient care.
Discuss why courage is an important character trait for a doctor.
Okay, so courage to me is having the confidence to speak out when things aren't going right, or also embracing kind of new innovations in healthcare. I think it's really important for the progression and for optimum patient care. I think probably the main example is probably in high stress situations where you don't necessarily have the regular experience of dealing with that kind of certain scenario. It's having the courage to persevere through that situation and to carry on with that new treatment or carry on with that unfamiliar treatment, because it's going to give that patient the most care. I think it's really important to have that courage in those certain environments. But it can also be kind of on a day-to-day setting in terms of, whistleblowing. If you see something that is not respecting patients' dignity or confidentiality and things like that, that it's really important that you have the courage to speak out about that, because you have a duty as a doctor to ensure beneficence to a patient, and you want the optimum care for them. So recognizing and having the courage when mistakes happen in the environment to speak out about that. And also, again, along the lines of new innovations and things, if you're reading a certain paper or you've seen a new technology that's recently come out, having the courage to maybe suggest this treatment and to use it in practice yourself is really important. But I also think it's really important to acknowledge a balance with courage. Yes, we need to push ourselves out of our comfort zones to ensure that we are helping and saving these patients as much as we can, but also ensuring that we're not putting patients at risk. And that there's a fine balance between having the courage to carry out, say, these new and exciting procedures, but also acknowledging that sometimes the normal procedure that is carried out is okay, and it ensures that the patients are having as much of an improvement in their condition as they can.